Watching Negima has been a completely novel experience for me. I was about halfway through the show when, while doing some preliminary research for my write-up, I stumbled across the video Preparing for UQ Holder, What You Missed in Negima, which is linked in the description, and I highly recommend you check out, especially if you've only seen the anime. Let me explain to you what I knew about this show going in. Mahou Sensei Negima is a 2005 anime based on a manga. It's a harem show which is mostly unique for having a sequel come out many years later in 2017. It's also interesting for having another adaptation air 1 year after the original series in 2006, this time directed by Akiyuki Shimbo, which as I understand it is essentially unrelated to the source material and is closer to a Panny Pony Dash type surreal comedy. Oh, and don't you worry, we'll get to Panny Pony Dash at some point in this video series. Anyway, if you know about this IP already, then you're most likely chuckling to yourself, knowing what I'm about to be in for. Well, it turns out the Negima anime only adapts about 10% of the manga, possibly even less. This is because it was literally made too soon, before the real plotlines of the manga had even cemented themselves. I found this out pretty early into my research, but it wasn't until seeing the Preparing for UQ Holder video that I realized just what this means. Negima the anime goes like this. At the start, it's pretty similar to many harem shows you may come across. A big cast of female students all vying for the affections of one teacher, well, maybe two teachers in this case. Comedy and hijinks ensue. You've got generic tsundere girl, ojo-sama, deadpan girl, many tropes you might expect. Honestly, I was already okay with this. I have nothing really against these types of stories as a genre. They're really great, but 3 shows into reviewing every 2005 anime, I'm glad to finally see anything that's at least half decent. The show then starts to take a turn away from straight comedy during one arc, where a student is revealed to have actually been a vampire the whole time, who's been trapped by a powerful mage and forced to repeat middle school for eternity. Oh, I somehow didn't mention, this show is a fantasy. The main character is a 10-year-old teacher, again Panny Pony Dash links, who also happens to be a mage and is hiding his power levels in order to keep magic secret in this world. From this vampire arc onward, we focus more on action and combat, but still with a healthy dose of slapstick and fan service. The show is tagged with ecchi after all. Everything from the smooth McGroove-esque soundtrack to the brightly saturated character art is guiding you towards this show being a pretty decent light-hearted action comedy drama thing. Yes, there are moments of genuine drama in here, and as someone who is very picky with dramatic scenes in wacky anime, I have to say that these actually work, which is surprising. The characters are genuinely endearing. The show never takes itself too seriously, but also doesn't feel the need to undercut every single real emotion with comedy. I can appreciate some well-controlled tone like that. So thus far, this doesn't seem like a completely novel experience that I mentioned at the start, so let's talk about what shocked me. I'm taking a break from the show to do some research as I've started writing a script about a mildly charming goofy comedy anime when I come across this random YouTube video. Preparing for UQ Holder. Oh yeah, that's the name of the second season from 2017, I think to myself. Nothing could have prepared me for the video I was about to see. It's a detailed explanation of the lore from the manga. Detailed lore, you say? In a school harem anime? Oh boy. This manga plotline seemed to be describing a completely different series to what I was watching. Multiple parallel dimensions, political drama, a whole creation myth. That generic tsundere, she's actually the Imperial Princess of Twilight, Asuna Vesperina Theotonasia and Teo Fuchsia, whose power is as strong as the Life Maker, the literal creator of all life, and the only one capable of defeating her permanently, except her memories have been wiped by this point, so she's living obliviously as a middle schooler. That vampire from earlier? Actually pretty much committed genocide in the past. At one point in the manga takes down the equivalent of a Balrog with one hit. In fact, I would say if this video is accurate, the manga's closer to a shonen action-adventure epic, which you would just never possibly be able to imagine given the show as first exposure. Needless to say, I deleted everything I'd written up to that point and started from scratch. Answer me this, how the fuck do I review this show on its own terms knowing what I do now? I'm only on the 3rd video in my series and I'm already getting stumped. Honestly, the scale of the commitment I've made is only just starting to hit me. There were 110 shows which aired in 2005. That's 110 days minimum of non-stop anime watching, script writing and video producing alongside my uni work. But now's not the time to question my life choices, let's get back on track. The visual presentation of Negima at first may seem a little bland or even subpar, yet it's secretly doing a really good job at communicating information to the audience. Let's take this screenshot I took during an early episode. There are 14 characters on screen here, and somehow not a single one has a well-drawn face. That's almost impressively bad. But why did I take this screenshot? Do you notice anything weird going on? If you answered, that one girl has a red outline where everyone else has black, congratulations, you win. When I saw this in the show, I took a grab of it to send to a friend. Lol, why the fuck does one character have red outlines? What even is the quality control in this show? But as the episodes went on, this one character was consistently drawn with a red outline. And something else stood out. She's always slightly off center frame, and she never seems to interact directly with the other characters. In fact, at a certain point I thought, wait, she hasn't said a single line yet. All the other 30-something students in the class play an active role, and yet this one red outline girl has oh shit, she's a fucking ghost, I bet. Of course, this ended up being true. The show never had to actually tell me anything. Through clever visual markers, I was able to make deductions myself. It's nothing too complicated. I think most other people would probably easily notice this too, and yet it makes you feel smart. The show isn't hand-holding you, or at the very least, it's rewarding perceptive viewers. I'm a sucker for shit like this. It's nothing crazy inventive, but just shows an example of creators treating their audience's intelligence with respect, something which seems to be getting more and more rare with the increasingly homogeneous and lowest common denominator direction media is headed down. Take a look at this freeze frame for another good example of show don't tell done well. Again, it's not the most detailed or beautifully composed shot, but I bet you can guess the whole personality of this grey-haired girl from her facial expression and body language alone. In fact, I think this is a great example of why anime appeals to autistic people more than the live-action TV shows neurotypicals watch. There's nothing vague or misleading about this face. For someone who can't read facial expressions automatically, this is literally night and day. I can tell with a glance what's going on in this person's head, whereas with a real actress, I would have to dig through layers of micro-expressions and subtleties just to try and figure out what most people would intuit naturally. And that takes enough effort that I even miss actual stuff happening in the story because I'm too occupied trying to figure out someone's motivations, or I'll just ignore the faces altogether and only focus on dialogue, missing out on the actors' performances, which, you know, it's a funny meme to say how easy acting is as a job, but we all know a lot of actors work incredibly hard for years perfecting their craft. Thankfully, my autism doesn't affect me too bad in this area. I would say, well, obviously it's hard to guess at, but I probably only lose about 20% of information through facial expressions. I'm lucky in this respect, but for my neurovariant friends who are more affected by this, it can be a radical difference. I'd like to take a moment and clarify some of my use of language in these reviews going forward. I often refer to fetishes in shows, but I don't use this to necessarily mean a sexual fetish specifically. I'm referring to particular character traits or plot beats which appeal to a certain person on more than its own merits. For example, if I say I have a fetish for the deadpan girl archetype, I don't mean that I'm sexually attracted to those characters. It's more like I can relate more strongly to that trait, in part because I developed a similar style of banter with my dad growing up. A sort of social game of trying to one-up each other with increasingly outlandish jokes while retaining a completely straight face, until eventually one of us breaks and we both start laughing. Or perhaps it's due to watching so much Star Trek The Next Generation as a kid, where Data was my favourite character, and a lot of the comedy with him comes from a similar disconnect between the emotionless delivery and the content of what's being said. For further detail, watch the episode Data's Day, Season 4, Episode 11. No media is consumed in a vacuum, and it's probable that most people have particular fetishes like this which connect them on a higher level for some outside, hard-to-specify reason. With that example, it's easy to come up with why I may be drawn to deadpan characters, but even stronger, I am easily drawn in by girls wearing gothic Lolita fashion. Have I mentioned that Akiyuki Shimbo is my favourite director yet? Anyway, I have absolutely no idea why I love this aesthetic so much. The only thing I can think of is the goth girl from Danny Phantom, which I loved as a kid. Anyway, I just wanted to clarify that my use of the term fetish is divorced from the common purely sexual context. I bring this up because the 2000s harem show, and in fact the 2000s conceptualization of moe in general, is heavily based on having a wide variety of characters, each of whom appeal singularly to a particular fetish, casting a wide net so most otaku will likely have at least one best girl to hook them into the show. With the class of 30 or so students, each of whom get at least some screen time, you're bound to find at least someone you can relate to. But in my opinion, some of the best moments are when we focus in on one or two characters and explore just them for an episode. For example, episode 7 is mostly spent with this one ninja girl, And although there's nothing particularly special about her other than, she's a ninja, this episode ends up being surprisingly wholesome despite the fan service, some real character building with Negi, and just nice slice of lifey times hanging out with a cool person. I can imagine if your fetish is ninja girls, this might be the peak of the show for you. Then again, we also hit a major problem with this type of cast. The ninja girl barely shows up again after that episode. We just don't have time to take this any further because there's so much ground to cover with all the other characters, and at some point they've got to fit the actual plot in. At the very least, this means there aren't many slow or filler moments. We're always doing something to either build up a character, set up a joke, or further the story in some way. Non sequitur. One song in the BGM uses a gamelan for like a mystical/magical atmosphere, but there's other instrumentation in that song. If you don't know, gamelan's a musical tradition from Indonesia, which notably uses a different tuning system than the Western 12-tone equal temperament. But the other instruments in that song are using the Western scale, so the conflicting tuning systems make for some crunchy microtonal harmony. Personally, I'm more used to microtonal music than the average person, but it's still a pretty out there sound to randomly pop up in an anime OST. Just thought that was noteworthy. Well, I better start wrapping this video up. In my opinion, this show is worth watching for episode 19 alone. As a real man, of course, I haven't cried since I was 2 years old, but that episode sure had me close. Like, think about that. This anime, which gets written off constantly as inferior to the manga, or seen as just another ecchi harem show, has more genuine emotion than Air, which I reviewed previously, a show that's essentially crybait from the very beginning. So in summary, sure the ending is, well, questionable, but there was clearly some genuine passion put into the making of this show. While it may not be a spectacle by any stretch, I think it completely succeeds at being a low-key, genre-straddling take on some popular formula. I can comfortably recommend this to any fans of romance, slice of life, or maybe even action. I'm going to give it a comfortable 7, closer to an 8 than a 6, but it's a 7. There's not quite enough consistency to rate it any higher, it's slow to get going, the style's all over the place in a way that can be distracting, and there's not much happening aesthetically to carry you through some of the less than great episodes. Tomorrow I'm going to be taking a look at Girls Bravo and every other show released in the year 2005 as I go on, so if you want to stick around and find out what's going on there, consider subscribing. Also, a final reminder to check out Through the Choruses video on the lore of the manga linked in the description. And right under that link you'll find my Patreon, where any support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. I'm quite happy with how the script turned out. I would consider this the first proper video in this 2005 series, a show where I actually had something to say. It sure was a lot of hard work to make though. It kind of has me worried about the future of this series, seeing how much effort it took to make this one video that will fully get under 100 views. Well, no time to dwell, I've got anime to watch.